The biggest issue kids had was hunger, kids were fainting, kids were running away from school, and the population had really gone down. I was able to sustain up to about 50 children, raising money and feeding them. A year in, a lady gave me $1,000. There's a time I went to the bank, we had 116 shillings, and I was just like, how are you gonna feed 50 kids with 116 shillings?
Wawira Njiru is a trailblazing social entrepreneur whose passion for transforming the lives of children through nutrition began with a bold vision and just 25 meals. Her innovative Tap2Eat system is revolutionizing school feeding programs, combining technology and data to serve 450,000 kids daily and 78 million meals to date. A champion of equitable access to education and nutrition, Wawira's story is one of resilience, innovation, and an unshakable belief in the power of community. A great story is about to be served. Let's dig in. Wawira, welcome to the Nitpicker Podcast. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tap2Eat is simultaneously simple and revolutionary. Just look at that. It's amazing. Could you tell us a little bit about it? Very, very simple.
Thank you. Tap2Eat is something that gives me a lot of pride because it's technology that we developed in 2019. And the reason we developed it was initially, when I started Food for Education, we were feeding about 25 children every single day. It was free food, and the kids were not contributing for the meals. I was an international student. I was doing my undergrad, and I was fundraising through friends and family and with my contacts, because I was doing my undergrad in Australia, my contacts in Australia. And I was able to sustain up to about 50 children, raising money and feeding them. And then when we started thinking about expanding,
were these kids in Kenya or in Australia?
Yes, in Kenya.
Okay.
So I'd send the money back home. I grew up in Ruiru, so it was in Ruiru. While I was able to sustain about 50 children raising money, but the need was much greater. So we started thinking about expanding, but I knew I couldn't, as a person who just graduated by that time, I couldn't sustain feeding even 100 every single day. So we asked the parents if they could contribute for the meals, and they said yeah. And they gave the amount of around, at that time it was about 15 shillings that they could contribute.
Per child?
Per child per day.
Okay.
So that's how much they were spending on, let's say, mandazi or something like that. But for many years, so we started contribution in 2016. For about 3-4 years, it was cash. So we got to about 3,000 children contributing cash, and it was so bulky. So you'd get your 15 shillings, you have to collect, some come with 50, then you have to give change. The person serving is just not doing the math the way it's supposed to be done. Then you have these little buckets that have all these coins that you don't know if it's the amount of money. Then the biggest headache, which you hadn't thought about, was converting those coins and banking them. Because then you have to find a way that the bank will accept them as, either go to a supermarket, convert them to cash. So it was just too much work. So Tap2Eat was developed because of that, because we just wanted to give parents a very easy way to contribute, but also an easy way for them to know, did their kid come to school? How are they doing in school? Are they actually showing up? Because for a lot of parents, it became the only way they were sure their kids were in school. Because you leave home really early. Yeah. Your child, in the morning for many households, the child goes to school, the parent goes to work, different times. Then they see each other in the evening. Yeah. You don't know if your child actually went to school that day. But, one of the things when we're developing Tap2Eat is that I'm not a techie, I'm a nutritionist. So I didn't know anything about technology, how it works. The inspiration, outside a phone or things like that. And the inspiration was bus metro cards. And when I lived in Australia, we used to have bus tickets. And then we would change to a Metro card, like an Oyster card or a Metro card, like a very easy way you just tap if you've been on the London Tube or something like that. It's one card that you top up that you basically just tap at the gates and then you enter.
So it's loaded with funds.
Yes, loaded with funds, exactly. Okay. So obviously kids couldn't use a Metro card because it's a card, they don't have a wallet. Yes. Why you have a card is because you put it in a wallet. And so we thought, what are the things that kids will use that is really easy. So we thought about like putting a card on a lanyard, but they'd lose it when they were playing. And then the wristband came because of that, because we tested like both having a card on a lanyard, different forms, and then having it on a wristband. And the wristband had less loss because, they liked the color. It was very interesting. But the technology was so simple. Like it's just an NFC chip. NFC technology is literally your credit card, your ATM card.
Okay.
So it's like global, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But the software was local in terms of making sure that the parents, so we had to find a way parents top up through M-Pesa. And M-Pesa is very easy to use for a lot of people. But we needed to link M-Pesa to then the wristband so that when a parent tops up on M-Pesa, it's linked to their child, the wristband the child is wearing, and then their account is being debited every time that their child comes. We also wanted to make it quite simple for the parent to top up. So if you have 4 children, you don't have to top up for every child. So you just top up in one account, which is your main account that you register for as a parent.
Yeah.
Then all the children who are linked to your account, basically it's like having a bank account where one person is the owner and then everyone else is sort of accessing it. So that would make it easy for parents, because we found that a lot of parents, when we were doing testing at that time, it's still the case for many parents, had feature phones. So kind of writing and doing the whole transaction so many times, if we have 4 children, parents wouldn't do that. So making it easy for them. And then now making the wristband very easy for children that they like it. They want to come with it to school. And then they just tap and get their lunches.
So how would the parent know that the child hasn't gone to school? Because, I'm wearing the wristband and my mom has loaded up, let's say 15 times 5, which is 75 or something,
yes.
Right? I'm very pathetic in math. So is mom seeing my account, is the account depleting every day? So how is mom tracking?
Through USSD. So there's a USSD that only parents can access, which is now a lot of parents. We have *648#. So basically then, we had a different USSD, but now it's *648#. And the parents can essentially see their balance, see their statements, see what is happening at school.
Yeah.
And they also get a lot of SMSs. At the moment, I think we send about 5 million SMSs a month to parents to remind them to top up, to just, make sure that they know what is happening in schools for their kids. So it was a lot of trial and error. We found a local tech company that we worked with that helped us develop the software. And then the company was called Terra, and they're still good friends. But after a couple of years, we decided to now build our own tech internally. And the process of building the tech internally was like hiring a tech team and then having the tech now being hosted internally for security purposes, for being able to scale. And it's been a really good decision. We have an amazing tech team that makes sure that Tap2Eat has no faults, because you can imagine at lunchtime, every single day, we have hundreds of thousands of transactions. Every day, I think at the moment, we have about 1 million transactions happening every single day in terms of top-ups, in terms of tapping, in terms of everything in between, because it's hundreds of thousands of parents who are either topping up or making sure that, or the tapping is happening within the school.
So let's take it a step back. So by the time you were starting, you were feeding how many children?
25.
20. So, but no, by the time you were starting the Tap2Eat.
Oh, Tap2Eat, 3,000.
You had 3,000.
Yes.
So let's take it further back. Your first one, you said that you were doing it while you were still in university in Australia. Your first number of kids in Ruiru were 25.
Yes.
Now you're in Australia. How is this cooking happening? How are you ensuring that there's food getting there? There's somebody doing the cooking? How did you choose the school?
Yeah. So good questions. I grew up in Ruiru, and I grew up in I'd say like at that time lower middle class home, but I was still very fortunate. My parents were able to take me to school. They were able to give me 3 meals a day. I never felt, there are things that you wish you had, but I never felt like I was hungry and I couldn't get access to different like food or education and things like that. And so I went to primary school, I went to high school. My parents are actually pastors. And so there was a big drive towards serving, service and community work. And so when I finished high school, I was in PB doing a lot of community
What's
service.
PB?
Precious blood. We call it PB.
Yeah.
Precious blood recruiter, just in Kawangware. And I used to do a lot of community service with, the girls, and the school was very oriented towards that. So after I finished my high school, I went to Australia for my undergrad. So I went to Australia as an international student. Why I chose Australia, when my parents wanted me to go to Australia, was because they could only afford to pay for one semester. And they were just like, after that, you have to figure out like getting a job and paying the rest of the years. So I was feeling like I could do that at that point. But, if you're thinking of taking your kid to Australia, that's a real conversation that I had to have with my parents. But also I didn't fully know, and they didn't even know, like, what are we going to do? What kind of jobs are we going to do? I thought I'd be like a waitress or like a barista or something like that. And I ended up working in nursing homes and disability care, which, at that time was really hard. Right now, maybe many years later, it was such a good learning experience for me. But it's something that I think, can make or break people.
And doing what in a nursing home? I mean, you're not a qualified nurse. First of all, what had you gone to study in Australia?
So I had gone to study. So the first thing I did was, because it was cheaper to go there with a diploma. Although I'd qualified for a degree, I started with a diploma because it was cheaper. So I did a diploma in health sciences, and I was supposed to choose a health science degree, any degree like pharmacy, nursing, nutrition. So I ended up choosing nutrition. So I actually made the decision of nutrition while I was in Australia. It was really good because you do this fairly cheaper diploma still at the university, but then get a year's credit. So you've actually not lost any time. And so I studied to do, that's what I was studying. But I didn't have any experience in nursing homes, in sort of like caregiving, which was the job. 24-hour care, from making breakfast for people, making sure that they have their meals.
Are these old people?
They're old people. In nursing homes, in disability care, they're people with disability. And making sure that they have their meals, also making sure that they're showered, making sure that they go to the toilet, cleaning after them if needed, if they were not able to actually physically go to the toilet themselves. And it was a very difficult job. I started doing that when I was 19. And so you've literally, can imagine, come from precious blood recruiter. I had 1 year at home trying to figure out, because I finished high school when I was 17, trying to figure out where you want to go. And then you go to Australia thinking, wow, Nimenda Maju. Yeah. And then you're there.
You're supposed to be a barista in a
Exactly. Maybe barista, but you didn't know where the money for school fees will come from. And then you're like working with people who are 90, essentially 90.
And cleaning up after them.
But also the other thing is I got, which now I think is a privilege. At that time, it was very tough, to help them and assist them as they passed on. Just to be able to hold their hand when they were dying and just being there for them, cleaning after them.
Were you prepared for this psychologically?
No. But it's sort of like you enter in a space and there are all these people who are doing it. Like, it's the job and I need to pay school fees. So if it requires me to do this, and also it's a human being sitting there who's like, who's at the last stages of their lives, because we had some people who had palliative care. So you have to take care of them, clean them, make sure they physically are looking presentable when their families come, so that the families are getting to spend time with them. If they have family, if they don't have family, you sort of be the person who takes care of them until they pass away. And you have to also make sure that, obviously, you're not giving them drugs because they're nurses. I wasn't a nurse. But you're basically taking care of their physical needs to make sure that they're comfortable as they pass away. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It was such a privilege. Now I think about it then. And you also it's like being a doctor, maybe. I don't know. I've never been a doctor, but you sort of, that's your job. You do it with the best that you can, but you can't hold it so personally as much as you can. And so the first 2 deaths or something, I felt really bad. But then afterwards, you just start building like, that's why I'm here, to help this person take care of them. But that was a period of my life.
And how do you turn this experience then into what you were doing? Because you're actually watching life's continuum.
Yeah.
So how did you turn that into what you were doing?
So, I mean, it was at that time, I was in Australia from 19 to 23 years old. And so I think at that time I was just thinking about, to me, they were distinct. I was like doing this thing, but also I was thinking about back home. What can I do to help people, to sort of give people an opportunity, especially children? And why children was because I felt, so my parents were actually, they got scholarships or opportunities to get education through other people. And so I always knew that someone else can make a big difference in someone's life, and that can impact their children, because I was a beneficiary of my parents having education opportunities through essentially strangers, right? And so I was thinking about how can I be like that stranger to give back what my parents had been given, and by extension, I'd been given. And so at that time, I was thinking about education and what I can do in education. And I asked my dad to go to primary schools because I wanted like basic, not high school, but start basic, and ask what the biggest challenge kids were having in school. My dad went to different schools. Ruiru Primary was the closest. And they said that, the biggest issue kids had was hunger. Kids were fainting. Kids were running away from the school, and the population had really gone down because of that. And so the head teacher asked, if you were to start a school feeding program, that would make a really big impact. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense. That's really like terrible that kids are fainting and they're running away and not getting education because of hunger. At that time, I'd already transitioning into my nutrition degree, or I had already from the diploma, because I did 1 year of the diploma and then that gave me a year's credit. And so I did 3 years of the nutrition degree. And so when I started thinking about starting a school feeding program, first of all, I had no money because, again, I'm an international student. I don't have money even to, I'm paying my rent, I'm paying all my expenses, I'm paying my school fees.
And how many jobs were you doing by this time?
So I was doing about 3 to 4 jobs at a time. Basically, how it works is you just do shift work. So you have one job that you're doing a couple of hours with, and then another job that you're doing a couple of hours with. Because why I think a lot of people do nursing jobs or caring jobs is because it's a 24-hour job. If you work at a cafe, it only opens during the day. But caring is a 24-hour job. So if you go to school during the day, or if you have classes in the afternoon, you can work in the morning. If you have classes in the morning, you can work in the afternoon.
Does it pay better?
It pays better too. Yes, per hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not by, I don't know if it was by that much, but if you accumulated, maybe it was $2 to $3 an hour. But at the end of the day, if you accumulate so many hours, you're getting paid way more.
And this is what funded your education.
This is what funded my education. Yes.
Your parents only funded your first semester.
Yes.
So it's funding your education, Wawira. It's helping you set up this first feeding program.
Yes. So I'm finding time to actually do fundraising while I'm working these jobs and going to school. And this fundraising was, the first fundraiser was an event I planned at a church in Adelaide. I was actually back last year and I drove past that church because that church was, a nice environment. It wasn't too big, not too small. And they allowed me to get the space for free. And I cooked the food in my house. So I was living in it's called a granny flat, but essentially it's a bedsitter. I was living in a bedsitter and I cooked almost all the food with my friend. So it was burnt pilau. It was pilau, but not supposed to be burnt, but it ended up being burnt. Stew, because I told everyone it's a Kenyan dinner. So my version of a Kenyan dinner.
Crispy rice.
Crispy rice with pilau spice. And I cooked Kenyan. To me, Kenyan stew was peas and carrots and meat.
Yeah. Proper.
So proper half Kikuyu food, people of the mountain. And then I cooked chapati. At that time, I was like a pro at chapati. So at least that one I almost got right. And then some of my friends brought salads. So people are literally eating mostly the salads and the chapati. And
how
maybe
many
a little
people?
bit. 80 people came. Yeah.
How
80
did you
people.
advertise it? I mean, because this, do you go to this church?
I had friends in that church, and I'd gone to a couple of events, and I was just getting to know people through school. I used to do a lot of volunteering, like I'd volunteered for World Vision, I'd volunteered for something else, because I'm still trying to find that community service thing that I can still do, because I felt like that helped me give me purpose outside like going to a nursing home and working there or going to university. So it helped like and built like friends. And so, and some of those friends I'm still friends with till today that I met through that work. And so that's how I got all this community of people who ended up like coming. And if you're in Adelaide, which is a city that I went to, is not that big of a city. So you sort of, once you say it's a Kenyan dinner, people are like, "Oh, Kenyan dinner." And then they all like want to come. And it was nice. I raised about the equivalent of about 125,000 shillings. I sent that money back home immediately to my parents. They started building a mabati kitchen. And then the kids and this kitchen was in a church. So essentially the 25 kids would walk to the church, and get the food, and then they'd go back, go back to school, and the teacher allowed that. So that was essentially the start of it. And then to sustain it, I'd continue just talking to people. People would give, like, I remember this time, maybe a year in, a lady gave me $1,000, and I was just like, I cried. I was just like, because I was used to raising like $10, $20. Like $1,000 to me was just, first of all, I don't have $1,000 myself. And then I'm also like, this person is so generous. Like, she was the mom of a friend. She gave me $1,000. And when I went back last year, I actually asked her, like I met her and I asked her, "Why did you give me $1,000? I had no structures. I had nothing." And she said to me, "I saw how hard you were trying to do this. And I thought, if I can do something to encourage you to continue, then I want to give you this too, so that you can feel like you can do it, like to feel that energy of like somebody believed in me so you can continue." And that was really touching that she said that, because she did exactly that. By giving me $1,000, I used to feel like, wow, if she gave me 1,000, then maybe I should keep doing it. Maybe I should just keep feeding kids.
By this time, you want to do good to your community. You're not thinking about this like a business.
No.
For you, it's community.
Yeah.
So the school identified the 25 children. So it was the school that identified them. And then slowly that starts building up. So when does maybe I should ask it this way. Do you feel that it then became a business of feeding children?
So in terms of like, when people would say business, they think in the profit-making sense. We've never made profit, but it's a non-profit that exists like many other non-profits in the world. There are bigger ones, World Vision. The UN itself is a non-profit. So there are a lot of non-profits that exist in the world. And so what it's become, I think, is more of a scaling enterprise, social enterprise, in the sense that it serves a need that exists in Kenya and in communities. And it does in a way where we're trying to be sustainable. So we're trying to be sustainable because a lot of nonprofits rely only on donor funds. And we've seen shifts that happen in donor funding that become, that mean that the work stops happening. So what we're trying to make sure is that, first of all, the parents have a stake, because at the beginning, the stake, and continues to be, parents are a big shareholder in their children's life, in their children's success. And so them contributing is a way that empowers them and gives them that ability to feel like, yes, I'm not just getting this for free. I have a stake in this. But we know that they can't afford the full price of it, right? They can't afford the full price because of economic reasons. They're not at the place economically where they can afford that. And so what we do is we bring other partners who can help support parents to feed their own children. So at the moment, we have philanthropy, which is donors, like most nonprofits in the world, but also we have government that also supports county governments that also support the children in their counties to be able to eat and to make sure that parents are having the support that they need to make sure that the children are fed.
Yeah. And what I've heard you say is it's a scaling business. So
scaling and social enterprise.
Scaling and social enterprise. And what I'm trying to drive at is you started with 25. You're at how many children now?
I think it's 450,000 at the moment. But I mean, now this January, I think we're going to maybe be closer to 500,000 because of grade 9s and also new admission and things like that. Yeah.
And this has grown exponentially in how many years?
So for 12, this is the 13th year. But the first 6-7 years were very slow because I was personally in university. I was figuring out what do I want to do with my life. Do I want a quote unquote real job? Do I want to do this? So
what's a real job?
A job where you don't have to, it's a job where someone else worries about the P&L and you don't. So that was the real job that my parents and many people expect, where I just do my part, I leave, but I'm not in charge of how the thing scales, I'm in charge of my thing. And also it's also a job that has existed before, I think, a job that at a company that has existed for many years versus starting something yourself is very scary and very daunting and is not considered real by many people until it exists. Yeah.
What was your parents' role in this growth? Because what I've heard you say is they started with you in terms of going to identify the school. Have they been on the sidelines as you've grown this? Have they held your hand? Have they said, is this really a real job? What's the role they've played?
So my parents have had many phases. And I think they're in their best phase yet. Their first phase obviously was, they were very supportive. Actually, when I used to raise the money in Australia, I'd send the money to them. I could trust them. They'd go buy the food in the market. We had one cook. They'd make sure that the cook has cooked the food and everything. They just were in charge of accounting for the money and making sure that it's run. It's very small. So it was just an add-on that they did to support me. But then when I came back, I think they thought, they didn't expect that I would say, this is the thing I want to do. Because, you have a degree that they took a loan to pay the first semester for. And then you've gotten an international, they can tell all their friends, there's an international degree. They didn't have the privilege of going to university. So they're very, very proud that you went to university, they went to college. And so they're really, really proud. And then you say, I don't know if I want to do a nutritionist traditional job. And so they went through a phase of trying to figure out what is she actually talking about in terms of, you want to do this thing, you have no money. They don't have any money. You want to feed people with what money? You don't have any, and I'm not going to give you my little money and give it to you to feed other people's children. And at that time, I think there was more tension because it was just the expectation that they had was that I would be able to come back and get what is the real job that I was talking about. But I was, I tried it a couple of times. I did a small stint at Unilever, for example. And then you're doing all these interviews where your dad says, I know someone, you should go and talk to them. My friend, this, and this person's sister's brother, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And also a lot of applications. And I realized when I would go for interviews, because I was just struggling internally with, okay, I'm trying to go on a path that I can't really fully define to my parents and give them a clear rationale. And I asked them, I'd go to the interview and I'd just answer the questions wrong, even if I knew the answer, because I didn't want to get the job.
The body was there, but the spirit was not
willing. Yes, exactly. But, I was probably 24, 25. And so at that time, you're just figuring out what do you want to do with your life? I started a master's degree here at JKUAT/Emory. I didn't finish that because I just felt like, I don't know if I really want to finish the master's. I don't think I want to do this. And so like, I was trying to figure out, is this, because I was so scared of kind of putting my stake in the ground and saying, this is the thing that I want to do. It's very scary when no one else around you is like, yeah, you should do it. Yeah.
So you're very clear about what you don't want to do,
yes.
which is work in formal employment.
Yes.
But were you clear about what you wanted to do? Because by this time now, the feeding program is still ongoing.
Yes.
Your parents are your first employees,
yes,
as it
yes,
were.
Yes. No pay.
But you're back, so
yeah.
there's no fundraising that you're doing.
Yeah.
The program is now how many kids by the time
50,
you're back?
50.
You had 50 kids.
Yeah.
How are you funding this now?
Friends in Australia, like I'm
continuing
to support the church that I was going to, is continuing to support people around the world, are continuing to support. It wasn't as expensive, as it is right now. So at that time, it was just like all these friends, I'd built like the right connections where I was just like saying, give me $20 a month. The church was continuing to fundraise. But at that time, we still came to like close to quote unquote like death a couple of times. Because, you're not doing financial planning. So you just realize, oh my God, we're like in the middle of September and there's no more food for the rest of the year. Or there's a time I remember I went to the bank, and I remember the ATM, it was Equity Bank, and I got the slip and it said we had 116 shillings. And I was just like, how are you going to feed 50 kids with 116
This
shillings?
is like Jesus with 2 fishes.
Yeah,
and 5
exactly.
loaves.
But somebody would always come and say, hey, here's like an extra $100. Here's like this. And you just go buy that extra bag of maize or even kilos. Like one of the suppliers who we started with, who still supplies to us like grains, till today, always tells the story of like, she used to come with kgs. Like she'd send a motorbike with kgs of things, kgs of beans, kgs, because we couldn't afford to pay sometimes like a whole bag. So you buy kgs, give me 5, give me 10, and you just keep building out on that. Right now she delivers with tons of trucks, like big trucks. So she's also really grown. So yeah, at that time it was just like, you're living a day at a time. Yeah.
In summary, how do you move from 50 to 450,000?
In summary of 7 years.
In summary of 7 years, because that's not 10x, that's not 1,000x, that's not 100,000x,
So one of the things like to scale was really important was the central kitchen model. The central kitchen model was something that I found on YouTube in an organization used by organization in India. We now have a formal partnership with them. But they, at that time, were feeding about 1.8 million kids using mostly central kitchens. So I thought, this is interesting. It gives you scale, but also you're able to, because my pressure at that time was like, and it still is, how do we feed more kids? How do we make sure that more kids are getting meals? And so thought about building a central kitchen, crowdfunded the money here mostly because I'd moved, like I was in my second year here. So we did a campaign called 44 Plate for, I don't know how many people. Sometimes I meet people and they're like, I remember that campaign. So 44 Plate, where we're asking people to give 40 shillings for a plate of food to build a kitchen, to feed about 1,000 children from that kitchen.
And you've moved on now from Ruiru Primary to more primary schools in the area? Or you're still
without the kitchen, no. Without the first kitchen. So before we were just at 50. We haven't built a central kitchen. We do the crowdfunding, we get some money, then we start building the central kitchen. But it's still, the goal was to now move outside Ruiru Primary. But at first we had to start at Ruiru Primary because Ruiru Primary was still like, it had, I think, 600 students and it was still 800. It was still growing because parents were bringing their kids, hearing that there's a school feeding program. And so we moved from once the first central kitchen was done, from about 50 kids to 300 kids overnight, which is very exciting. And then we increased that to 800 and 1,000, still at the same school because the school was growing. And then I started thinking about like, how do we expand to new schools? And that's when we got to about 3,000. That was about 3-4 schools that we were at about 3,000. at about 3,000, we're collecting cash, and then it becomes, we can't scale when we're collecting cash. It becomes like the thing that is going to block us from scaling. So then we developed Tap2Eat, and we say, okay, we need to find a way that parents can still contribute, because it's such a core part of parents want to do it, and it also gives them so much agency and also helps us to be sustainable. And so Tap2Eat was developed. A key thing that helped us, so we moved from 3,000 because of Tap2Eat to 10,000. So that scale was because we had now a technology that could include the parents very easily. And then we opened our second central kitchen. It was built by a member of parliament in Dagoretti South, John Kiare, and he built the kitchen. And so we expanded from about 10,000 to about 20,000. So we started thinking about how do we work with government, because government also is as responsible for children as parents are. Parents are the first responsibility, and government is the next. So how do we bring them on board to make sure that they're helping us be able to feed more kids? And so he was the first member of parliament who built a kitchen. So that was the second central kitchen. So with a central kitchen, we would move to 20,000. And that was actually in 2020. That's when the second central kitchen was built. And now we have 29 or 30 central kitchens. So after that, we partnered with, the next, I think in 2022, we're building more central kitchens. We moved to Murang'a, to Mombasa. No, sorry, not to Murang'a, to Kisumu, to Mombasa. And then we work with the Murang'a County government, the governor there, Kangata. And he says, let's start with porridge, because we'd never done porridge before. And then we learned we can actually work with government to deliver porridge across, I think, 700 ECD centers that they have. And then after that, at that time, we were talking to the governor of Nairobi, who was then senator. And he was really, really passionate, Sakaja. He was really, really passionate about school feeding. So he said, if I become governor, I want to do school feeding. And that's when now we started thinking about how would we implement a school feeding program at the scale of Nairobi, which is about 250,000 students at that time. And so after there was a long process after he became governor, we started thinking about how would we partner to do that. And that's when, for example, the program in Nairobi that some people know called Dishina County came about, that feeds essentially every single public school child in Nairobi for a lower cost, because the government of Nairobi came on board and then contributed to subsidize the meal further.
So it moved from 15 shillings
to 5.
To 5 shillings.
Yes. So 15 was still subsidized. Yeah. So the government, actually the county government of Nairobi said, you don't even have to raise as much philanthropy for Nairobi, because we're going to cover 25 of that. Because that makes it more sustainable, where the government takes responsibility, it makes it more sustainable, because the government is able to say, we have a stake in making sure that the children are being fed, and the parents are still having a stake by contributing the 5 shillings in Nairobi. So in Nairobi, they contribute 5 shillings, which is frankly amazing, because it's like the cheapest meal. I think in Kenya, in Africa maybe. And by contributing that, they still have a stake, but it meets the parents where they are, because they're parents who are going to work. Sometimes they find a job, sometimes they don't find a job. So the 5 shillings is like something that they can bring to the table and say, this is what I can bring. And we say, okay, then your child is going to get a very, very nutritious meal for that amount. Yeah.
Have you been able to see a correlation between the child's performance in school and getting a consistent hot meal daily?
Yes, it's such a big, big correlation from performance to enrollment, to attendance, to nutritional status. So first of all, we made sure that the meal is nutritious. So it's high in protein, has your vegetables, has your carbohydrates, but very high in protein, because kids need protein to grow and their brains need protein to develop. The nutritional content is really important. So the meals that are provided high in iron, high in zinc, high in the micronutrients that children need to grow, that are so, so essential for children, and high in protein, and have the vegetables. And then you see the correlation where, for example, we're doing a sort of 3-year study in Nairobi, where we've already established a baseline of the meal that the child is getting at school is incredibly nutritious and helps them meet their recommended daily allowance for so many multiple micronutrients that they need. But also you find that in Nairobi, we have about 72% of parents who are earning below 10,000 per household. So 10,000 shillings, you can imagine, for a household of maybe 5 or 6, is not a lot to go and buy the beans that you need, the sort of micronutrients, the variety that you need on a plate. And so by providing it in school, these children are getting very high nutrition for very low cost that allows them to grow and stay in school and be nourished. So we've seen a lot of correlation with attendance, enrollment going up, and performance as well. But for example, the study that we're doing here is being tracked over 3 years to find what that correlation. But because the program has existed for years so far, we're already seeing positive
in terms of
impact.
The actual performance in class.
Exactly.
So what happens to kids during holidays, Wawira, then? Especially the December holiday, which is almost 8 weeks, November, December.
Yes.
Yeah.
At that time, we don't operate. So kids are, a lot of kids may stay at home or they go to up country for them. So we don't operate at that time. The biggest challenge is actually, it's very hard to aggregate when schools are not in session. So it's very hard to sort of say, let's aggregate. Schools are just a good aggregator. But majority of the year we are operating, we're making sure that kids are getting the right nutrition. And you're seeing that in the results, in how they're growing, in how their weights, their heights, we're measuring that. And we're seeing that even by providing while school's in session, you still have very, very positive impact for them.
What I've heard over the last hour that we've been speaking, Wawira, is a lot of grit and resilience on your part. You just you take a view and you say, this is where I'm going to focus, and you go for it. How has that shaped what Food for Education has become? Because it started off with employee number 1 and employee number 2, your parents, and has grown to how many employees now?
About 4,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
4,000. So how has that grit and resilience played out in this organization? We're not going to call it a business, but it's the business of
feeding kids.
It's a triple bottom line business. It's not profit. It's it's how you're affecting people, the societal impact, and how you're affecting the community as a result.
There is such a strong at the beginning, you just do things by, you try it, you wake up the next day and you're like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try this other thing. So you don't know that you're being grateful. Is that a word? You're having gritty and resilient, because it's something that you're waking up every morning and you're like figuring out like, okay, maybe I should have tried this. Maybe I should try this. Maybe I should work on this. And I think one of the things that has been really, really helpful for me, first of all, is having like a clear impact rationale for myself. Like in terms of like, if I wake up and I try really hard, this is the outcome of my efforts. Kids get fed. So when I'm feeling down and I'm feeling like this is not working out, I'll go to a school, feel, my contributions matter, right? I was able to impact someone. And so having that impact rationale has been really helpful, because that's something that's always been a center for my life, to have like an impact rationale and to be like, my contributions mean something, not just to myself, but to many other people. So that has been helpful. I think also a lot of support. So, if I didn't have the amazing team that I have, it would be very difficult to execute. You can't feed 450,000. I struggled to feed 80 one time and give them banned food. The kids don't get banned food because I don't cook it. So without all the amazing people who contribute, it would be very, very difficult to execute. And it's very hard also to have resilience when you're alone. So building the right community around you and the right team is really important, because those are the people who continue challenging you when you're feeling down. They give you energy. They just say, okay, let me take this off your plate. I'll deal with it, and things like that. I think the other thing is the number of partners who've come alongside us. Finding the right partners is so, so crucial to scale. And we've had amazing donor partners that have continued to support our work and believe really in the dignity of these children. And, the other thing is, apart from donor partners, we have parents. Parents continue every single day. It's so inspiring that they continue to invest in their children's food, in their children's education by making sure that they are well nourished while they're learning. So that's a big, big part. If parents were like, nah, we don't know if this is important, we don't want to contribute, we don't want to do this, it'll be very hard to execute. The other partners that we've had that have really supported us and give me a lot of ability to feel like this has now the opportunity to scale and to reach more kids is government. Because, the partners that we have from Governor Sakaja, Governor Kangata, Governor Abdul Swamad Nasir of Mombasa, the members of parliament, like I mentioned, John Kiari, and different members of parliament that have worked with us to build kitchens, to support, to make sure that children in their counties or their sub-counties and constituencies are being fed is really, really important. Because as I said, the child first belongs to the parent and the parent is chipping in. Then the government comes in, and now philanthropic partners say, okay, these two have come in, let me cover the rest that needs to be done. So I think that also gives me a lot of resilience, because that the people who need to play a part of this are playing a part in it. And eventually, I think grit and resilience also comes from having, I think for me has been, my family is very supportive. My friends are very supportive, the people around me, making sure that you have people around you who see you as you are. They challenge you, they encourage you, and they also push you to be the best version of yourself, where you have no limitations. I think at this point, while my parents wanted me to get a formal job, at this point, if I tell them like, oh, we just got this award, they'll be like, wow, that's amazing. I knew you could always do it, versus like at that time, they were just like, this is a job for you. You should get something like that. Yeah. So.
And your mom has accompanied you when receiving, because you received awards outside of Kenya, quite a number of awards. Yeah?
Yes. So my mom has accompanied me and my dad as well. Last year, they accompanied me to Oxford when I received the Scholar Award.
What's the Scholar Award?
So the Scholar Award is an award that is given every year to social entrepreneurs by the School Foundation. An incredible award that, recognizes, but also gives financial resources to organizations. And for me, it was such an honor being on stage in Oxford, a place that we were colonized by the British. So you're back to like where it started, and you're receiving an award for recognition, and seeing my parents in the audience as I gave my speech made me really teary. And also knowing that, they'll always support me was really, really important. So they continue to support me, which is important to me, and so many other people in my life, my friends, my family is really important to me. Yeah.
One last thing is, when we came, if you remember last year, we came to your central, I like the way you call them central kitchens. They're not central kitchens anymore, they're decentralized, because then you have over 30 kitchens.
Yes, and we do have decentralized. So we have rural kitchens and urban kitchens now. So urban kitchens are about 30, the bigger ones. And we also have smaller rural kitchens, produce about 500 to 1,000 meals.
So you're talking about you've got your urban kitchens and your rural kitchens. But one thing that when we came around, you told us was that the kids come with their lunch boxes, and some of them even take lunch home for their siblings who are not in school. So this is impacting not just children who are in school. This is, for some families, their main meal.
Yes. And for the kids, a lot of them, it's their main meal and the most nutritious meal of the day. And by bringing the lunch boxes, we also wanted to give them ownership in terms of, this is your food. You don't have to give it back if you can't finish it. You have like agency over how you want to give it to someone else or your siblings. And so they, a lot of them take it back home. I see a lot of comments of parents on Facebook saying, I tasted the food. It was so good. I ate it. It was really good, because the kids, even the parents, want to know, what am I what is my kid eating? And so for a lot of parents, I actually learned that more during COVID, that a lot of parents were saying like, I really like this meal. And I was just like, but you're not in school, because the meal comes to them. And for a lot of parents who go, you can imagine you go hustle, and there's nothing, but your kid brought you a little bit of food. That's really important. So by giving the kids, we serve enough portions to make sure that the child is satisfied, but if they also have the option of helping or supporting their small siblings back home.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Wawira, I want to start something like this, as do probably many people listening or watching this, and just in our small way, in our own little way, in our little village primary school, can we get like a template on what we need to feed the kids, or what are the basic needs of a basic kitchen?
So one of the things that we get requests like that a lot, and one of the things we're working on internally, is how we can build that capacity and how we can be able to disseminate that knowledge. So we're in the process of figuring out how do we do it in a way. We do it in an unofficial way, so someone just comes, it's ad hoc, but we want to do it in a more formalized way that makes people have the information, but it also helps us like codify what we know so that we can distribute it as well. So that's something that we're working on, because, we're not going to be able to feed all the kids in the country. Yeah. Our goal is 1 million kids a day by 2027. We're now, closer to 500,000. We're going to be there soon. But at the same time, there are 10 million children in Kenya. So a person feeding kids in their community is so, so important to us, because those kids are going to be fed. And so we want to be able to build, because we've learned a few things on the way, to disseminate that and build that capacity.
That's impact.
Yes, exactly.
Great stuff. Before we close, Wawira, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, as always. So before we close, we like to end with a little tradition here on the Nitpicker Podcast, and we call it Nit Picks on the Quick. These are just quick fire questions which are designed to help us get to know you in a different way. Don't overthink it. Just go with the first thing that comes to mind. Ready?
Yes.
Don't be. Okay. Early riser or sleep in on weekends?
Early riser.
Text or phone call?
Phone call.
Cooking a meal or ordering takeout?
I want to be cooking a meal. My goal.
You're a nutritionist.
But actually,
very carefully.
Yes, exactly. My 2025 resolution is to be cooking a meal.
So right now, it's not you prefer to take out.
I don't prefer it. That's why I want to go. Life has forced me into that. Yeah.
What do you order usually?
Why I want to cook is like, I really like just basic, ugali, skuma, beef, things like that. So that's why I'm going back into cooking. Yes.
You didn't answer the question. What do you order when you take out? Ugali, skuma, beef? Do you have like a plug?
Koseres,
So you have a plug.
places like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mountains or the beach?
I like them both. I'd say beach.
Yeah. Travel back in time or fast forward your life?
None. I'm happy with here.
Where you are, the here and the now.
Yes.
What's your favorite Kenyan dish?
Ugali, skuma, beef.
Combined?
Yeah. Not in one pot, but together. Yeah.
And beef stew or beef choma?
Stew.
All right.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you always carry with you?
Lip gloss.
What's your go-to stress reliever?
Reading.
How do you read?
Fiction.
Yeah.
Yes, I love fiction.
Crime, romance, any particular genre, or you just go for it?
Not romance. Maybe crime, but I like stories about people told interestingly. Yes.
Most inspiring place you visited?
India and Japan. I'll say 2 places.
Why in India?
India, because it's a very big country and they found a system that works for a vast majority of the people. And that's very inspiring to me. And I think about that for Africa. It's almost same population, and they found things that work for a vast majority of people. And their development story is very, very incredible. Japan, because it's, I would say, it's a mixture of tradition and a mixture of modern. So it's just like the right mixture of how do you retain and how do you progress. Yeah.
Read the book or watch the movie?
It depends which book and which movie. If it's fiction, maybe read the book. If it's an inspiring story or like a biography, watch the movie. Yeah.
Great. Thank you,
Oh,
Wawira.
thank you.
It's
That
been
was
fantastic
easy.
having you on the podcast.
I can relax. Yeah.
And we'd love to have you back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
And that wraps up today's episode of the Nitpicker Podcast. With innovation that feeds children and puts parents at ease, Wawira has cared for both the young and the old. I think we can all agree that Wawira has fed us a fairly nutritious story. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. Don't forget to comment, to like, to share, and to subscribe to stay updated on more stories of incredible people making a difference.